But before we do that, I want to transition very quickly to
What's the science of tattooing?
the science.
I see what you're doing there because we're transitioning to ifs.
Ooh, I like that. The science. Intersecting faith and science with Pope C. So this is you've invited feedback, so we'll provide some feedback. But before I finish up the conversation about tattoos, quick little segment. The intersecting of faith and science
He needs a jingle.
with Pope C. Like,
Yeah,
bells
jingle's
or
a great idea. So today I'd like to talk about on the origin of species, which is the name of the book that Charles Darwin wrote.
Never heard of it.
It is really important that most of the time when people talk about the book, they will just say the origin of species, which we'll get to at the end why it's important. The name of the book is not the origin of species. It's on the origin of species.
Interesting. Okay.
So, for those of you who don't know, there's a guy named Charles Darwin. He was not a sailor. He was a naturalist.
Not a sailor.
He was
had
a
no
naturalist who sailed around the world in the 1830s. So he sailed, I think, the whole world around. And he spent a lot of time in a place called the Galapagos Islands, which are just off the north coast of South America. And the fun thing about islands is that, especially if they are remote in terms of the people around them, if people cannot move between islands, then animals cannot move between islands. So you get places like Hawaii, Australia, New Zealand, where you have a lot of endemic species, and the species have more space to get weird, which is why you have the tortoises, the finches that we're going to talk about. Things get weird, which is why you have kangaroos and I was trying to think of another Australian marmots. I don't know.
Wallaby.
That was the word I was thinking.
Koalas.
Wallabies,
Koala
koalas.
bears.
You get weird things if you don't have mainland predators like in the Galapagos. So one of the things that Darwin is noticing as he's traveling around the Galapagos Islands is he's seeing a bunch of finches that are all relatively similar, but have specific and distinct beak shapes that allow them to do different things. And he hypothesized that nature would selectively breed. We talk about eugenics. This is the natural version of that, which comes to be known as natural selection. That nature would selectively breed for finches that are better at getting food than other finches. So you have a population of finches that mostly feed on grubs and berries. And one of them is born that has a slightly larger beak that allows it to crack open clams. It will then be able to propagate its genetics better than other finches because it can eat clams and berries and worms, right? So it is able to propagate. And
We're tracking. Yes.
yes. So you have these finches that the larger beaked finches can eat more foods than the smaller beaked finches. So these finches would then breed more than their smaller beaked compatriots, and thus their descendants would have larger beaks overall. And given enough time, that would then develop into a separate species of finches that have larger beaks and now only eat the larger food. Does that track?
Pterodactyls.
No.
Okay.
Okay. In a big way, no. We'll get there. So what Darwin wasn't able to see is everything going on a molecular level. Because Darwin was traveling the Galapagos in the 1830s. We have so much more knowledge now than Darwin did then.
Microscopes.
Right. So the first microscope was made in like the 15 or 1600s. And the first cells were discovered by a guy named Robert Hooke in the 1600s. He was able to see the cells of cork bark in like his microscope. He could see that there were cells, and he called them cells because the little
Why was he looking at
things.
cork?
I have no idea why he was
Was he
looking
a
at
big
cork.
drinker?
Probably he was a monk.
Oh, okay. Oh, that makes sense.
He was a monk.
See,
So they had
you should
lots
have
of
led,
cork.
You should have led with that.
So they had
That
cork
brings it
because he was
more
a
into
monk.
understanding to most
and
people.
he had a microscope, and I don't know if you've ever owned a microscope, but at some point you're going to just start shoving things under the microscope to see what you can see, because microscopes are awesome.
Did you know like your iPhone and stuff has like microscope
I've seen people make like macro lenses out of them.
Yeah.
I really want to start trying how to do that. Anyway, so he is looking at cork bark under his microscope, and he is able to see the plant cells, and he can't see into them. He can't see what they are, but he can see them, and he calls them cells because they remind him of the rooms in his monastery, which were little boxes, and they called them cells in the monastery. So we
That's the origin of the word cell?
That's the origin of the word cells.
That's
it's from
cool.
a monastery where that's what they called the rooms, and he saw
Interesting.
them, and they reminded him of the rooms.
What year was this?
That was the 1600s. I don't have a specific. I probably could have looked it up. 1600s.
It's a lot later than I was expecting.
Dude, we discover everything way later than you think. We didn't have germ theory until the mid 1900s or something.
That's
like
'cause you
way later
that's
than you
Dude,
would
we
all
think.
didn't have
sicknesses-
Facebook since 07.
Yeah. So the first cells are seen in the 1600s. The living living breathing cells aren't discovered until the 1700s by a different guy, because obviously. And at that point, we can only see them at the point that like they are able to see the cells and they're able to see that they're moving. They can basically see the cells the same way that you can see cars on a highway from like the helicopter view. Like you can see the cars. You can't tell what's inside of them. You can't tell how they work. So all of that comes. We don't get to actually see what's inside a cell until the 1930s, which is where we're able to see all of the complex things inside of a cell, all of the organelles, all of that kind of stuff. And this is where we come to Darwin's black box.
So we're sorry to interrupt, but it just occurred to me that Darwin was looking for good genes.
Yes, he absolutely,
Full circle.
Yes.
That was great.
he absolutely was.
Yes.
Looking for good genes.
Nice. Hey, yeah, that's a fist bump.
Thank you.
That's pretty good. So Darwin sees these finches. He sees them changing. The question is, how do they come about? And Darwin actually says, when he comes up with this natural selection idea, that his hypothesis would fall apart if the things inside of the cell were not able to be created through gradual processes.
Basically, that the smaller they got, the more simplistic they were.
The smaller they got, the more simplistic they got. What we find in the 1930s when we invent electron microscopes and we're able to see inside of a cell is that the inside of a cell is unbelievably complex. For instance, in every one of our cells, there are around 13 different organelles necessary for the working of the cell. It is surrounded by a semi-permeable cell membrane called the cell wall that allows certain things in, but not everything. And this is my favorite thing. So, are you guys aware of how big DNA is? So you know it's a big molecule. It codes for all of the things in your body. I didn't realize it is 3 billion base pairs long, which is, if you think about it, it's basically 3 letters, or a letter per base pair. So it's 3 billion letters long. That is 500 million words. To put that into perspective, the Bible is around 780,000 words. Lord of the Rings is around 570,000 words. And Wheel of Time, the longest single series I've ever read, which is 15 books long, is about 4.4 million words. Every strand of DNA in your body is 500 million words long.
Some good genes.
Some good genes.
And when you look into it, for life to exist, your DNA has to be replicated a few trillion times a day, which requires an army of proteins and organelles to do. Because every time your cells divide, it has to replicate your entire genome and then propagate that into the next cell. So I had a whole lot of stuff. We're trying to move quickly. The more you look into each cell, the more complex it gets. There are things like flagella and cilia, which are the tails on things. The most famous flagella is that of a human sperm cell. You know, the big thing that...
Also great genes.
Yes. So those, if you look into them now that we have all of the advanced science we can look into the structure of flagella. They are ridiculously complex structures that require a great deal of coding.
That we can't even physically replicate.
No, not at the
Hardware,
size,
no,
for
no,
certain
no.
not. So here is the thing about the origin of species, because it is on the origin of species, because Darwin was not trying to explain the origins of life, because evolution cannot explain the origins of life. DNA, RNA, there's a whole, we're not going to get to it. There's a whole idea of the RNA world, which is
These
life
are all
arising from
multiple
RNA.
episodes of ifs.
I didn't realize that.
You're figuring this out.
Yes, we're working on how this is all going to work out. There's a thing called RNA world where people have tried to come up with an idea that RNA could arise by itself.
You went back there.
And
We
it is
can deal with that.
Crazy.
Intersect faith and science with Darwin's black box in its simplistic way.
Evolution is not a basis for the origins of life. Atheists talk about it like it is. They want us to believe that evolution is the nail in the creationist coffin. That they have this idea of evolution, that it explains how we got here, how all of this works.
Wrong.
And it just absolutely isn't. Evolution cannot explain the origins of life. For evolution to work, you have to have life. Evolution, natural selection are mechanisms by which life changes, but it is absolutely not an origin of life. It never was supposed to be.
Right.
It has just grown into that because they want to put a nail in the Christian coffin, and it isn't that thing that they want it to be.
It's an explanation for microevolution, but not macroevolution.
But not macroevolution, and
'Cause
not
because-
specifically the origins of life.
Because
You can't
again,
have-
the origins of life require, like, the scientific method doesn't work because no one was there. Like, you can't replicate the origins of life, so it's forensic.
Exactly.
It's a different science. It's forensic science,
looking
and not the
back at
scientific
how
method.
it works,
And what's even
and you can't replicate anything.
And when you go further, when they try to replicate stuff,
They
like
can't.
with dark matter and stuff, they find that doesn't work the way they thought it did.
Every experiment that I have researched, where they're like, we're gonna make we're gonna make a thing that is like the way it would have been, 10 billion years ago or whatever, fails to create the thing that they're trying to create. We have never been able to create any form of self-replicating DNA or RNA because evolution does not explain the origins of life, and they do not have a good explanation why.
You know what that reminds me of?
Tattoos.
genes.
Tattoos. Tattoos. Creighton was right there.
That was,
I was on
tattoos.
it.
That was a good intersection of faith and science.
It
there.
was excellent. It was excellent.
I appreciate it.
Let's get back to